Welcome to the Dave Palma Show, the podcast that revives, restores, and awakens your innermost capabilities.
You have the training and the talent to succeed, but do you have the guts to fail?
I love what I do. When you love what you do, you want to be the best at it.
Today is about the power of you. You will change the world.
Find your path to success through the journey of those who have succeeded. And now, your host, Dave Palma.
Hi, welcome back to the Dave Palma Show. And with me in this episode, I have an anthropologist, former business school professor, and practicing management consultant. He is the founding partner of Experient, a workplace culture and strategy consultancy. Drew Jones, welcome to the Dave Palma Show.
Thank you, Dave. It's really great to be here. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you coming here, Drew, and great to have someone of a professor, actually, a business school professor. However, although it's business that's there, you probably have a good experience and knowledge around the workplace culture in general. And I mean, you're a consultant anyway, aren't you? So you must have come across a lot of leadership and culture issues anyway.
Absolutely. Well, I come at the whole process of helping organizations with culture, and particularly I'm a workplace strategist as well. So we design environments where people work, but there's a big cultural component to that. But I approach all of this really as an anthropologist, even though I don't lead with that with my clients because, for them, that can seem very exotic.
Yeah.
But I come from a background of social science, evolutionary science. And so I look at human behaviors through the lens of evolutionary science, really. And it's a powerful lens to view it, but it's also not one that's necessarily shared by most people. Most folks tend to have what I would consider sort of I won't say shallow, but a simplistic view of what culture is, as if it can be socially engineered like other aspects of business. But people are people, and there's certain things about, the way we interact with each other that are need to be understood, from my view, from a perspective of science. And that was really the motivation behind the book in the first place. But yeah, so there's a lot to talk about here, and the analogies from sport, I think, are always important as well. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, great. Fantastic. Well, we'll probably get started with that first. Well, it's no best kept secret that I'm an ex-firefighter, and I did go down the management route a little bit, but I got more involved with the trade union and took a politics degree halfway through my firefighting career as part of the interest of that, if you like. And I gave you a little backstage conversation around that. However, what is also no best kept secret is that it's been in the media a lot. I mean, for me personally, a couple of firefighters and a chief fire officer, actually. And, I was obviously involved with a lot of, diversity and equality issues as well, and things like that from my perspective, as well as in general, because obviously things like misogyny and that has to be addressed as well. But however, in the fire brigade, it's very white male culture. I'm not saying that in a horrible way. It's just, there's a lot of, same as the police, there's a lot of stuff that's been going on. And even in America, as you know, things got picked out, and you probably looked at that with great interest yourself, and it's nothing to do with picking on one person when they mention the word systemic. But what's happened in the fire service is, from my own perspective, I also got diagnosed with dyslexia halfway through my career while I was studying a degree, actually. So I had to look at the system and while I was trade union rep, to challenge it and try for my own safety as well. Say, look, listen, this can't go on, this kind of leadership, and culture that's going on. So in recent years, during the pandemic, one black firefighter committed suicide. He was a trainee, and it was a leadership issue and culture issue. That's what they pinned it down to, not one particular person on the ground that said, yeah, blah, 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 and driven him to suicide. Although it's a very stressful job, as you can imagine. Secondly, and the last, I think it's 6 months ago, or maybe less than that, about 3-4, our first ever black chief fire officer committed suicide. He joined the job 2 years after me in 1992 and just got qualified as a chief fire officer about 3-4 years ago. Deputy chief in the Midlands near Birmingham not in London, in the UK. And some things was going on basically, but I think it's more to do with putting in the mechanisms of safeguarding and that. If you're a chief fire officer and that happens, you know, I don't want to go into the issues of all that. What I would like to look at from your point of view with that is how, the media's obviously looked at all this beforehand. About 2 years ago, there's some investigations into the culture and leadership and culture practices and said, yeah, you know, especially in English fire service, it's very toxic culture. The leadership needs to put certain things into place, and people now starting to do that, you know, from the top, actually, but obviously from the bottom, they're now going to sack people and etc. And I think they're starting to do that. However, how to put radical transparency into practice is one question, and how to tie self-organization into accountability is another one in relation to what I'm talking about there. So we would like to have that question answered in general. I'm just giving you an analogy from my own experience and the example as a case study, if you like. But before we go there, I'd like to, obviously from maybe a sporting perspective, ask you that you refer to Nike's former CEO, Mark Parker, as an anthropological leader with a high level of cultural intelligence, which in brackets says CQ. What do you mean by that? Because I'm an ex-athlete, track athlete, and I've been around athletes that were sponsored by Nike. I've been around Nike since it exploded in the scene in the late 70s, early 80s, you know.
Yeah.
So I've seen that side, yeah.
So Mark Parker, who retired a couple of years ago as CEO, and first of all, so many things about the two leaders that really jump out in my research for the book were Mark Parker from Nike, and then Satya Nadella, the current CEO of Microsoft, who both profile as what I call, you know, anthropological leaders. And by that, I mean, in cultural intelligence is sort of the heart of that. And in terms of Parker at Nike, you know, part of anthropology is the field of the research practice of called ethnography, where you engage in qualitative research
on the ground.
Yeah. On the ground. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as a leader, he always did that. He spent time with all manner of employees at all levels, treated them as real people, and would listen to their stories and get to know them, and was accessible to people. It wasn't one of these things where, you know, you had to book 6 months out a 10-minute meeting with him through his PA and all that. He was accessible internally to staff at all levels. And then really the gist of it is one of the reasons why Nike was able to ride that, what I call the democratization of fitness, and make it, you know, so when he came in, Phil Knight was CEO, and Phil Knight's motto was to be the number one sports and fitness company in the world. That was their sort of mission.
Just do it.
Yeah.
That's what the slogan was, part of that. Yeah.
But then Parker came along and his motto, his tagline was innovating for all the athletes in the world. And if you have a body, you're an athlete. So he tried to bring it away from the elite athletes, the Michael Jordans, the Tiger Woods, to everybody.
Can you tell me what period that was when he said that? Because obviously I was around when Michael Jordan's new sneakers, or you call them sneakers, actually we call them trainers or basketball boots, and that was in the late 80s, you know, and that
so this would have been, I think he became CEO in 2005.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
He was in the firm before that as a product designer. But he's an interesting case because not only there are other dimensions to his sort of cultural intelligence. So when he became CEO, even before that, but especially afterward, he really embraced pop culture in that he spent time and had these famous dinners at his house where he would invite not only athletes, but painters and artists and graffiti artists, hip hop artists, and became close friends with all of these cultural influencers from all backgrounds. And he said that was where he learned about the world, is through other people.
Yes.
And, and so like for example, when they got into skateboarding, like they now have a whole product line around skateboards. They knew nothing about skating, but this guy named Paul Rodriguez, who had won the X Games for one of the skating events, invited him over, his entourage, and got deep into skating. And so in that regard, he was like doing this ethnographic research. And then beyond that, when they decided to go all in on skating, he basically empowered Paul Rodriguez to say, okay, look, we're going to do this, but you're the expert. So we'd like you to come to us with ideas in terms of what the board should look like, what the gear should look like. And our design team will try to make that better.
Yeah.
But we want to use the insights from the actual participants, the actual athletes, to drive the innovation. And part of that was derived, I believe, from the fact that he himself was an NCAA long distance runner at University or at Penn State at the Division I level in college, and was quite good. I believe he was an All-American in one of the long distance, and that's what drew him to Nike in the first place, was he was a runner.
Yeah.
And so he was authentic in that he was a user of the product. He was an athlete, right? But then he also reached out beyond just his own knowledge and to other athletes, and was constantly in touch with popular culture. And so strategically, they were able to tie Nike's continuing process of innovation to what was really going on in the popular culture. So they became really an extension of American culture. And that's what I mean by his sort of high level of cultural intelligence. Yeah.
Right. That's just quite interesting. What did he have to say in relation to Nike Oregon? Because that was something that the shoe came out then, and obviously there's a big athletics training ground there in Eugene, isn't there?
Yeah. Well, Eugene is where the university is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The corporate headquarters is outside of Portland, but which isn't very far. But yeah, he was involved with he's been there a long while. He was there a long while with Bill Bowerman, who was the co-founder, is also the guy that the original waffle sole.
Yeah, I think I remember. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Basically, they've still got waffle soles actually. But
this was literally when they were experimenting for the very first time. They took rubber and cut it up from other shoes.
Oh,
and
right.
Poured it into a waffle iron.
Yeah.
And melted it
molded it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is when they were first experimenting with that sole, that thick. So he was there from the beginning, at that training facility. And he would be the one as an employee, as a product developer, who would lace them up and go jog to test these out, so.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So he was a real on the ground person, and definitely, like a Navy SEAL or undercover detective, investigative journalist, that kind of thing. I did do my obviously I did it in workplace, because now I'm so I was involved with more of a fitness coach kind of thing as my side hustle, if you like, then with the stress and everything else I was talking about just now, with the suicides and leadership issues, I shifted more to that side and, the life coaching side, and became, during the pandemic, with that suicide that happened, I got concerned. I thought, well, I'll pivot, because obviously the gyms and that, even though I'm an outdoor person, track and field and that's more outdoorsy type, thing. I play golf these days, but I pivoted to resilience coaching and trying to apply that with the knowledge I had and what's happened to me myself as well. So I know that when in 2005, actually, you mentioned 2005, when the CEO, the Nike CEO you're speaking about, came in to Nike, was when I wrote my dissertation on the workplace, and specifically with the 5 7s. What I knew, I did an ethnographic research, if you like, because I already had that 15 years of,
you were living it.
I had that intelligence already. But of course, it's sad that even up to this day now, they're saying, oh, we've got to do something about this. And there's been a couple of deaths with it. You see what I mean? It's like, they don't want to listen to someone on the ground yet. You know, it's terrible, really, the way that's happened. So that leads me on to the two questions I asked you in terms of, with all that going on and with, you know, the leadership and culture side of things. So how do you put radical transparency into practice? Because, you know, most firefighters on the ground would say, well, you know, I wouldn't hold my breath with that. And with every firefighter that, you know, that has a responsibility around all that, how do you tie self-organization to accountability, you know? So we could do that in general in any organization, because, you know, I really want to pick your brain and your experience from this.
Well, that's really a core message in the book. And most of the companies that I feature in the book, 15 little case studies, display some form of employee empowerment and create conditions for self-organization, but they do so in a way that also necessitates high levels of accountability. And I'll just give a couple of examples. There's a company called Morningstar, not the credit rating agency, but it's a tomato processing company of all things, Morningstar Tomatoes, and it's the largest processor of tomato products in the U.S.
Yeah. Oh, we say tomato, by the way, over
tomato.
Here. Anyway.
Ketchup, all the things. So,
yeah.
But they are a completely self-organizing company where there's no levels of management and there's nobody has a title. And they all, and it's all team based, output based. And, you know, compared to some sexy organizations, whether it's a Google or Nike or Tesla or whatever, you know, working in a manufacturing facility like that is not, you know, consumer facing product innovation. It's not like the latest iWatch or whatever. It's, you know, it's a manufacturing company. So the work itself is not the kind of thing that's going to get headline news. So, but it's how they organize. So, for example, when a new employee gets hired by Morningstar, they're required to write up what's called a colleague letter of understanding. It's actually a binding contract where the new hire writes down the value that they believe they can bring to the team they're going to join over the coming year. These are the contributions I feel like I can make to this team for this next year. But it's written to a specific colleague, a specific employee on the team. But once or every other month for the year, the recipient of it's called a clue, colleague letter of understanding. The recipient of the clue will go on the company intranet and post the person's progress towards their own goals. So if they're achieving those goals, they're on track. If they're falling short of that, then everybody in the company knows that they're underperforming. And the members of the team can, by a vote after 6 months, ask the person to leave. So on the one hand, employees have freedom to join whatever area of the business they want, to organize their own hours, all these things that we think of now as choice and flexibility. But if they don't perform, everybody knows it and they're held to account for their poor performance. And very similar at W.L. Gore, which is a materials science company that makes products like Gore-Tex jackets and stuff like that you buy, Patagonia jackets and a lot. They have a similar process of high levels of autonomy matched with radical accountability, where essentially employees can determine if a colleague's underperforming, whereas in a lot of companies that are much more command and control, you know, it's easy for somebody to maybe develop a good old boy relationship with a boss, and they get promoted, position, salary, everything else, because maybe they go to the same club, they went to the same university, this kind of favoritism. These companies that have practiced radical transparency say everything's out in the open and you can't hide from your performance.
Yeah.
So, it kind of, and similar right now, I can get into it in a minute, but Microsoft, this has been one of the things that, and it ties in with innovation, because the idea in this approach is that no one person, CEO or whatever type of organization it is, can by the laws of nature, no one person can have all the answers to every situation.
Yeah.
And so much of the insight about how something should work comes from the person on the ground actually doing it.
Yeah.
And so the goal in these organizations is to allow those good ideas to surface and to get rolled into what the company does, as opposed to the quote unquote foot soldiers merely executing the wisdom of the leadership, which, we see where that gets us over and over with bad business decisions or business decisions in fire brigades and other contexts. And it's really acknowledging, and this is sort of the evolutionary science of it all, from my perspective, is that culture is not merely values and beliefs that people share. In an evolutionary sense, culture is what separated humans from other higher primates in terms of our ability to observe, learn information and knowledge, and share that in a way where that knowledge accumulated over the generations, so that each subsequent generation has all of that previous knowledge and wisdom at its disposal, so that whether it was domesticating agriculture and 10,000 years ago, or the Industrial Revolution, or the internet, all these things were not done by one person. See, this is the great myth of Western ideology. Ideology is that the light bulb went off for one person and invented electricity or whatever. These all are processes that take a long period of time with lots of people innovating and experimenting. And that's what drives culture, is the continuous creation of new solutions. And also there's the emotional, the storytelling, and all of the sort of beliefs and religion that people wrap around all of that. But so that's really the model in the book, is the idea that how do you create conditions where everybody, not just the CEO and the senior team, can activate that side of culture where they're experimenting with things, not high risk things that'll cost money or lives, but in coming up with their own solutions based on their own experience and sharing that, and then having that contribute to the improvement of how things are done. And so there's research to show, and I highlighted in the book, that companies that allow this kind of what I call everyday innovation tend to have much higher levels of employee engagement and retention. People stick around longer. Why? Because they're able to use their full cultural selves, and they can contribute beyond just showing up and doing what they're told precisely. That sort of deneuters a person's agency to just execute over and over and over, as opposed to having original ideas and being able to act on them and contribute and be appreciated for that. Now, I would say all that, the conversation about accountability, it does differ in a situation in a life and death organization, high intensity organizations like fire brigade, military, police. A chain of command structure is much more necessary in those contexts than it is in, say, a tomato processing company or a shoe manufacturer. You know what I mean? So
yes,
where you have to distinguish the types of organizations.
Yeah. I think what it is just they still kind of say, okay, we notice the difference between the discipline on the fire ground or the incident ground, and then when you're back in the station or wherever, that's the culture that we have to deal with. Do you see what I mean? Because you're not on the fire ground anymore. You don't need that high stress thing but then you're dealing with a lot of people with a lot of stress that's come back from something you didn't really want to see or do or whatever. But you've exposed to that.
Yeah.
But how do you manage all that? You see, it's a leadership and culture thing, isn't it? Really, you've got people from all walks of life together, obviously in a job they want to do, together, and now a more diverse culture and gender of people mixing together now in these jobs, and it's something new to a lot of people from the old school days, if you like. This is the issue we've got, really, so that's why I asked that question, because I don't think the transparency of dealing with that from leadership to try and make that cultural change, it is, I don't know, because I'm retired now, so I can't see it. And even as still a trade union member, I can't sit down and say, yeah, what's going on here? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, at least to say from the American perspective these days, police and even in the military.
Yeah. But you lived in the UK, so you got an idea of how.
Yeah. No. And I'd say, we're UK and the US are kissing cousins, as the
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there is probably more of a closeness there than. Well, we kind of got that interbreed between Europe and US. The US was really a former British colony, wasn't it? Really, part of East Coast anyway, at least. But anyway, sorry, I interrupted you. Yeah.
Well, so interesting, for whatever reason historically, and it's really becoming problematic here for political reasons, but historically, in the military here and the police, and I honestly, I don't know that much about the firefighters associations here, though. And for some reason, in the academic literature and on the management side, there's a lot of literature about police organizations.
Yeah.
I've read less about fire organizations, but there tends to be this really challenging, good old boy, racist, bigoted, hyper masculine,
boy school kind of, yeah.
and it really is something that, you kind of slightly referenced it in the case of the UK, and it's absolutely a case here where you hear stories with internal conversations, or there was a Facebook group was it in New York and Pennsylvania? There was a tri-state area Facebook group for for police.
Yeah.
Turns out that they're like people in there that were advocating, KKK stuff.
Ooh, yeah.
And yet they're out there on the front line policing.
Yeah.
And we think that they're out looking for everybody's interests, but maybe they're not, right? And so,
yeah.
But
that's not all of them. It's just what the bad apples they've got in there, and it's the same. What I can see in the organisation I've been in London Fire Brigade.
Yeah, but the same time, yeah, I'm not at all painting a broad brush, but then
no.
But then equally within the ranks of the military here, you've got a pretty solid group of people who are all behind, Donald Trump's white nationalism. And the fear is that if things tilted a certain way at a certain time, they might stand in and support him if he did something crazy.
Well, the way the world is going at the moment with the couple of wars that's going on, he's the wrong person to be behind that nuclear button, isn't he? It's on a knife edge at the moment, really. And, it's being handled quite well, isn't it, with what's happened with Iran recently?
It's an existential question for Americans but yeah, oh my gosh.
Don't want Donald Trump there at the moment.
but my point only is that there tends to be, in that macho culture, this overlap of this kind of white tribalism and power and sexism. And it's, so in that context, it's a tricky formula to get right. But leadership, this is just my speculation. I've never studied this environment. So I'm just thinking in terms of where you're coming from and the challenges of fair representation and access to career mobility and and simply the freedom to not be the victim of racist hazing and bigotry in 2024. It seems like it's
back in time kind of thing.
Back in time.
Yeah. There's certainly a lot of stuff out there now about what's happening with the police and fire brigade in UK. So
I will go look into that.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm curious about it as
recent stuff, really. So it's good research material for you to get your teeth into.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Real quick though, because obviously we're going to run out of time here, and I wished I could have spent longer with you, and I'll probably have you on the show again actually, because really I like to pick brains of academias like yourself. I know it's out of your context because you're more corporate, as in real business like Nike. But let's tell your audience a bit more where they can find your book and more about the work you do, where they can find out more about you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I run a workplace strategy agency called Experient. We help organizations redesign their workplaces and put together hybrid working programs, including the technology that's behind how do people connect when they're not physically co-present. And that's experient.work is our URL, but you can, and I have my own personal site at drewjones.co, and that's where you can find both reference to my book and links to my book, and at amazon.com. The book's called The Open Culture Handbook, and it's probably most easily accessed on Amazon. And yeah, those are my coordinates, and
we'll hope to see more of maybe a new input, which I've given you now for some research ideas to put on your website.
I will absolutely look into that. And healthcare. These are the areas.
Healthcare as well, yeah. There's a lot been going on. Yes,
where we need more.
Especially after the pandemic as well. And the NHS in the UK is in a little bit of trouble as well. So, yeah, that'll be interesting. A UK-US comparative analysis would be a good thing to start. Well, feel free to contact me anyway with anything you want, in terms of.
Absolutely, I will.
Data and stuff like that. But we've run out of time now, and I'd love to have you on the show again. So do contact me again if you want to come back on the show and talk about stuff.
I will, absolutely.
And well, once again, thanks for your very, very much sharing your expertise. It's really valuable to my audience.
Dave, I really appreciate the time. It's a lovely conversation. I really appreciate it.
That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening. And remember, if you want to support what we do, then share, subscribe, and leave a review over on Apple Podcasts. Or head over to my website, davepalmer.com, and click on Rate Show. Well, that's all for now, but I'll see you in the next episode of The Dave Palmer Show.
Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.